He has gotten one of the smoothest jump shots out of anybody who works in sports media. We're going to tell you why. We're going to tell you his story, not just what he's doing in sports, in the world of media and business, in production, but we're going to learn more about him from a human aspect as well. We'll get the full picture here of my guest today, Bob Carzoli. He is chairman of production, program, and pro crews. He does so many different things, wears so many different hats. I don't even think I touched on all the titles, but we're going to dive into his life on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So, Bob, I appreciate you doing this. And I want to, first of all, to get us started here and get us in the groove of this conversation, I want to dig up your basketball playing days for a moment. And at your peak, your playing peak, how good were you?
Not very good. So that's why I ended up being a basketball manager at DePaul. So it was a great opportunity for me to work in a top flight program at the time, 83 through 87. I got to work with Coach Ray Meyer, his last year, his 42nd year at DePaul. And then I got to spend the first 3 years with Coach Joe, his son. And, it was just, it was an amazing experience. And, I got to work with some of the legends in our industry. Ray Stallone, who was at HBO forever, was our sports information director. And Bob Grimm, who was director of broadcasting for the White Sox for 30 years, was our associate AD. Ginny Lenti, who just retired as the athletic director at DePaul, was our associate AD. So, the real foundation of who I am and what I've been able to accomplish, I think goes back to passing up playing college football at Brown and going to DePaul on a full ride scholarship to be a basketball manager for 4 years. And by the way, my jump shot is pretty good, but being a basketball manager, you become an expert at trick shots. And so a manager that I was friends with, Tom Nash, and taught me all of the secret skills that you need to win every game of horse you could ever play.
What is the most elaborate, extravagant, craziest shot that you've ever made?
Well, Tom taught me how to shoot from behind my back. So you actually hold the ball behind your back and you throw it over the top of your head. And I actually was playing against Rod Strickland when we were at Pepperdine in a horse match after our shoot around. And we didn't have a 3-point line back then, but I actually made a behind the back, over the top of my head shot from the top of the key. And by the way, the most beautiful university I think I've ever been to, Pepperdine. So yeah, it was, it was a really great time in my life.
What was Rod's reaction when he saw that one go through?
Same as always, jokingly referred to me as Fred Flintstone. And could not believe that Fred Flintstone hit that shot from behind his back from the top of the key. So yeah, I got to work and go to school with guys like Ty Corbin and Rod and Kevin Edwards and Dallas Comegys, a whole bunch of guys that played in the NBA, and just a really unique life experience that just not too many people ever have the opportunity to do.
When you say unique life experience, first thing that comes to my mind is you touring with Sting. And that experience, take us through what that was like and how that was completely different than this athletic career that you had going for yourself as well.
Well, I just finished up school, and I was a manager of a bar in Chicago. And my dad had this small little company, and Sting's production manager was a good friend of my dad's. And my dad ended up getting the contract to provide the video production equipment and the crew for the Nothing Like the Sun tour in 1987. And, we drew straws and I lost. So I got to be the video tour manager and camera operator. And so, I went from, living in Lincoln Park in Chicago to a plane to Rio de Janeiro, to a camera in front of the stage at the soccer stadium with 215,000 people there for our opening night. And I was down there for like 8 weeks, came home, and went back out for another couple months on the West Coast in Canada. So, I think for me, it really taught me two things, right? It was significant independence. And it also told me that I didn't have a desire to do this in terms of being on tour and traveling like that for the rest of my life. I was more interested in finding a way to build a career that allowed me to maybe not stay in one place, but at least spend most of my time in one country. So that was a great motivating factor.
You talk about independence, and you've also discussed how, let's go to your father and the way he was able to grow just this incredible company, and you step in as well. Something that probably has crossed your mind is, when you are going into a company that your father started, what sort of pressure do you carry within yourself to live up to what he wants, to listen to what he wants, but then to differentiate yourself and be different and be you and be authentic to yourself?
Yeah, I think our situation was a little different. My dad had started this little small video production company a couple of weeks out of drug and alcohol rehab, and which is where the name program and program productions comes from. It's the 12-step program. And so when I came in to help him, it was on the heels of 9/11. The majority of his work was related to convention work in Chicago, some union work, very little sports. And so I came over to help because after 9/11, there was no convention work, right? No one was flying, there was no work. And he went from whatever, $1 million in sales to zero. And, I came over and we negotiated with his landlord, and we told the employees they weren't going to get paid for a little while. And, my original goal was, let's find the big national player on the staffing side and we'll sell to them. And my dad, who was a rock and roll concert touring guy, could go out and do some shows and make some money. And there was nobody that was doing what he was doing in Chicago on a national basis. There were dozens and dozens of companies that were doing it locally and regionally. So I never really felt any pressure when I came over. The interesting part is my dad and I fought like cats and dogs, right? I didn't have a background in television. I came out of the world of staffing and employee benefits, employer services. So I was, my brother was the world's greatest camera operator. And, I never really had a lot of experience other than running some camera alongside my brother on hockey. So I didn't really have a lot of pressure, and I was just able to kind of come in and add, the one question I asked all the time is, why not, right? Somebody said, well, you can't do this. I'm like, well, why not? And, I didn't have a lot of the preconceived notions about what you could and couldn't do. And either it was a combination of arrogance and ignorance that I think really was what propelled me to, when somebody said no, I would say, why not to them? And, so when I first started, I got on, my experience was, you got on a plane, you go see people. And I remember showing up in New York and meeting with guys at NBC and some of the other networks, and they all looked at me and they're like, well, why are you here? The labor guys never come and visit us. And for me, that was, it kind of struck a nerve, and it said, okay, if the labor guys aren't getting on an airplane and coming visiting people, then I'm the only one that's doing this. So I need to capitalize on the guy who is in front of people all the time. And that's what I did. So never had any pressure. I mean, my dad's biggest year was, a couple $1 million. And, we're probably on pace for almost 300 million this year. So the company is very different. Our principles and our commitment to the people that work for us is exactly the same as it was, 37 years ago. But when you get to the size and the scope that we are, listen, I'm not even the president, CEO anymore. I'm not qualified to do that. And that's okay, because I have spectacular people now who run our company on a day-to-day basis, who are 1,000 times better at that job than I could have ever been.
Going back to your dad, and we're joined by Bob Carzoli. I'm Bryan Fenley. This is the Onto Something podcast. What noticeable differences did you see in your dad before he went to AA and afterwards?
Well, he stopped drinking and using. I mean, that was the most obvious thing, which was good. I think the thing that you get out of recovery is you learn that it's okay just to be you, right? You know, it's okay just to be Bob. I don't have to be this person that my parents expected me to be. He doesn't have to be someone that his kids expected him to be. You don't have to live up to whatever mythology you've built up in your own mind. It's okay just to be a regular person. And, you know, and so I think what I noticed out of my dad was, you know, 90% of his ego got put in a jar and put on the fireplace mantle. And don't get me wrong, every now and then, you know, a little bit of his ego will pop up, as all of ours will. And, you know, he'll remind me of the 10, my dad has about 20 of the exact same stories that I've heard 100 times, you know, doing boxing for Don King in Mexico and, you know, the Showtime and a bunch of his other important clients. But, you know, it was the humbleness that my dad, picked up after he went through recovery. And, you know, listen, I mean, you know, Jerry Steinberg and Jeff Mason are both on my advisory board, and both of them are long-term sober and obviously very active in the sobriety community. Jerry says it all the time, right? You know, the advantage of being sober is I've got to live these two amazing lives. And I think for my dad, I think that holds very true.
That's super powerful in the fact that even you witnessing your dad's transformation, maybe in a way that in itself sparked your own transformation to the point of which I'm trying to convey here. And that is, you talked about, Bob, being okay with who you are, not like your father in his journey, and realizing that I could just be myself. When did you come to that realization yourself that you can be Bob Carzoli and you don't have to be somebody else?
When I got sober 11 and a half years ago, right? I mean, it was, you know, I went through the exact same transformation that he did. You know, I had to come to grips with the fact that it was okay just to be Bob. And, you know, it's not, I don't think it's coincidence that the overall success of our company, you know, which is probably 10, 12, 15x from 11 years ago, you know, is related to the fact that I was able to get my ego out of the way. I was able to concentrate and spend my time really working and building. And, you know, it just allowed me, you know, not having your ego in the way all the time. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments of, don't you think, you know, don't you know who I think I am? You know, but yeah, I think for me, it's really allowed me to, listen, it's allowed me to be a better business person. It's allowed me to be a much better husband. I think I was always a good dad, but I think it's allowed me to become a great dad. Hopefully with both my kids married in the last year, sometime in the distant future, I'll get to be a great grandfather to one or two at some point. But, you know, I think one of the things when you move your ego out of the way is you develop a compassion for other people that you didn't have before, right? So when you do what we do for a living, which is, you know, 27,000 events and 18,000 people in the field, it's important to have compassion for those people, right? I mean, you know, when somebody calls up at 2:00 in the morning and says, I'm not going to be there for a 7 a.m. call because my 2-year-old's in the hospital with 104 temperature, you know, there's two reactions, right? One reaction is, you know, oh my God, we're completely, you know, up a creek without a paddle, and you're scrambling at, you know, calling people, waking them up at 4:00 in the morning. Or your reaction when your ego's out of the way is there anything I can do to help you? Call me if you need anything. And we'll make sure we get you replaced later today. So I think that's been the biggest benefit for me, is the experience of people like my dad and Mace and Steinberg, my own personal journey. And, you know, listen, we never would have been successful as we are as a company if the old Bob Carzoli, if you will, was still around, I never would have had the passion, the foresight, and the commitment to do what we've been able to do.
What was that breaking point for you when you realized, Bob, I got to do something about this? My family wants me to. I know I need to. The company knows I need to. For you, when was that?
My wife told me she wanted a divorce, right? And we'll be married this month, 32 years.
Wow, congrats.
She just said, "You're not the person I married, and you're a horrible human being, and you need to get your life squared away." And she's the one that drove me to the hospital, right? Despite everything, right? She's the one that drove me to the hospital when my world kind of fell apart. And I think for me, the life lesson that it taught me is that the people that matter to you the most are the people that are there when you're at your lowest, right? And because when things are great, everybody wants to be your friend. I have a million brand new friends here the last 5 or 6 years. People that want tickets, and people that want to go to events, and people that want to play golf and do a bunch of other things. I have a million brand new friends, but it's people like my wife, my parents, and a handful of other people, my brother Joey, who, when the proverbial crap hit the fan, it wasn't a very big circle of people that were still standing next to me. Most of my employees did, but they were just worried about getting a paycheck, right? It was the people that were closest to me that were the ones I could truly count on. And that really, to me, is the biggest barometer is, how do you handle, or who are the people that care about you the most and are the most loyal? Those are the people that you're going to have to be with, or you're going to trust for the rest of your lives.
When you think about, Bob, those people in your inner circle who were there with you in dire times, seeing how far along you've come in your sobriety, how do you show your gratitude for them, your appreciation for them, knowing who you are now, knowing how far you've come, and knowing how big of a part they played in your transformation?
Well, I think it's a couple things, right? I think I have to live a life, and I have to set an example that other people can they can point to and be proud of, right? Specifically, the people that matter most to me. I've got a great friend of mine back in Chicago who's been sober 50 years. And he was actually my dad's sponsor when my dad first got sober 35 years ago. And we see each other a lot. And I was struggling, not worried about drink or anything, but I was struggling with some work stuff. And, he sat me down when we were at the golf course one day, and he sat me down and he just said, "Listen, you have to set an example, right? You're not just a regular person. And so you have to set the example that other people are going to look to." And so for me, how do I, show those people? Well, I try to live a life that I can be proud of. I don't need anybody else to be proud of it, but that I can be proud of. I need to pay forward everything that people have done for me. So we're very active in bringing on new young people, giving them opportunities. We are the largest contributor, or have been the largest contributor, to the Sports Broadcasting Fund, Ken Agard's fund that was set up to help people in our industry. And we will continue to be a very large and active participant in that. So, I think simply, Bryan, live your life the right way, and be a good person. And, that sounds easy to 99% of the people that are probably listening to this and watching this podcast. But for people that struggle with the disease of addiction, those are things that seem foreign, right? Like living a good life, being a good person. And so for me, that's what I try to do, to show the people that have helped me that I was worth making the investment.
And what can your dad say about who you've become and how you've changed, in that here you are, in a way, living through his footsteps and going through not the same, but similar struggles that he went through. And for him to look at you and to see how much you've changed for the better, what do you think it would be like living in his mind and just seeing how you've transformed your life as well from his perspective?
Well, he lives 7.1 miles from me here in Scottsdale, and he'll be 80 in November. I think he's really proud of me. I think he's really proud of, both what I've been able to do professionally, what I've been able to do personally. Him and my mom have a very close relationship with my wife. And so I think for them, seeing the marital success that my wife and I have had, 32 years is not as common anymore as it used to be. I think he's proud. And I think, my dad's brother had the disease of, alcohol and addiction, and ended up getting like 4 masters in alcohol and addiction counseling. We've got crappy genes, right? And so I tell both my kids that, I tell, my brother's kids that, we just have crappy genes. And so you've got to be extra keenly aware of the fact that we're more susceptible to these types of things than maybe the average person is. But, we just had dinner with him the other night, and, every time I see him, I give him a hug and we kiss each other, and we tell each other we love each other. Every time we talk on the phone, we tell each other we love each other. And, I don't know how many sons still have that relationship with their father. I mean, I'm 57 and I still have both my parents. And so I'm enormously, Bryan, listen, I wake up every day and my knees hit the floor. And, I thank God for all the wonderful things I have in my life. And I thank God to have that. I still have both my mom and my dad, right? You never know how long that's going to be. And, my wife's lost both of her parents, and I saw how hard that is. And so, I have the one thing I have in my parents that I try to be for my own kids too is I have 2 enormous cheerleaders, right? The one thing about your parents is no matter how bad you screw up, no matter how horrible things go, they're always there and there's always supporting you. I heard a joke one time. It said, even Charles Manson's mom, sent him a birthday card on his birthday. And, I'm not Charles Manson, but, my parents have been there for me. And I hope that they know how much I care about them. And I'm sure that they do, and how much I love them and how much they mean to me, as does my wife and my 2 kids and all the other people in my family.
They're not just cheerleaders, but they have a lot to cheer about because of what you've done. And I think about, as we wrap up this conversation, Bob Carzoli is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. I liken it to, in a way, the movie A Beautiful Mind, because you mentioned that while crappy genes are in play here, the way in which you've been able to redirect that into something beautiful, into your business, into your family, is one of the great turnarounds in this industry. And what really could be, something like it to the movie A Beautiful Mind, and how you've been able to turn it around.
Well, by the way, I love the movie. I'm a big, the guy who's our president, CEO, Scott West, we always refer to movies. And I was joking the other day, it's funny that you bring that up. And I said, listen, I'm not looking for a bunch of people to hand me their pens in the cafeteria at Princeton. So we were referring to the movie.
Yeah.
Listen, the one thing that I know is I'm like an NFL quarterback, right? I get a huge amount of credit when things go really well. Most of it probably, or some of it undeservedly so. I get a lot of blame when things go poorly. Again, probably some of it undeservedly so. But I would tell you, I look around our board of directors, I look around our executive committee, I look around our advisory group, and I'm in awe. And the truth of the matter is that I get a lot of credit, but these are the people that have really taken us from, I maybe took us from A to B and B to C. These people have taken us from C to Z, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm just along for the ride nowadays. Scott and I always joke that no one ever tells me anything anymore, but it has allowed me to play a little bit more golf. But it's really allowed me to spend more time on things that I'm passionate about. Our new technology platform, which is really spectacular. And by the way, our son is now our chief technology officer. So all the money I spent at Northwestern and Imperial College in London appears to be paying some dividends. My daughter now works for us after a 5-year stint at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the money I spent for her undergrad and master's at DePaul in accounting is paying huge dividends. So, the biggest advantage I have at this point is I get to do the things that I really, really enjoy. I get to work on the things that I'm genuinely really passionate about. And all of the other day-to-day grind and details are handled by the best team of any organization in our industry. And there's no knock on my friends at NEP and Mobile TV Group and the networks and, the transmission guys. But I mean, you look top to bottom, and I would defy somebody to explain to me how their 12 or 15 people at the top of their organization are better than what our people are. And, our continued success is an absolute testament and proof of that.
Bob, if you're a quarterback, you are a quarterback in the West Coast offense because you're dinking and dunking, you're setting everybody up, you're spreading the football around, and you're helping a multitude of people get involved. And it goes back to something that you said, from your passion, from your selfless nature, and the way in which you've helped so many along the way, because so many have helped you. Bob Carzoli, I'm Bryan Fenley. It's been so fun. Bob, thanks so much for opening up the way you did, talking about your struggles, what you've overcome, and how you've turned it into a positive, and why you're definitely such an admired person in the industry. And I know you don't like to get the attention, but you really do deserve some praise. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you having me here. And I would tell everybody that watches, make sure you watch all the Brian stuff. It's really good.